Today is the last section of working with the unit circle, the last new section, and finding the trigonomic functions. Today we're going to focus on secant, cosecant, and also cotangent. You already know that cosecant is the reciprocal function to sine. So if we take, remember the s was in the middle, if we take and find sine and we just flip it over, we will have cosecant. Secant is almost like cosine spelled backwards. It's the reciprocal function of cosine. So if we find cosine and flip it around, we will have secant. Likewise, tangent and cotangent are reciprocal functions. So we're going to use these ideas when we're trying to find the exact value of these three trig functions. Let's be reminded again what sine, cosine, and tangent are, so then we can find the reciprocal functions of each of these. So we know that sine represents the y value because it was opposite over hypotenuse, y over 1. We also know cosine represents the x value, and tangent was sine over cosine or y over x. So we know that cosecant is the reciprocal function of sine. So if we can find the sine, all we have to do, this is 1 over sine, but I'm going to write it in terms of variables. It's the same as 1 over y. All we have to do is find the y, and then we just need to find the reciprocal. And the reciprocal is just flipping it around. So 1 over y is just flipping it around. Likewise with cosine and secant, this is the same as 1 over cosine, like we said, but more importantly, to help us get our values for this, is 1 over x. And cotangent would then be the cosine over sine, just flipping that around, or x over y. So what we're going to do when we're finding secant, cosecant, and cotangent, these three right here, is we're going to first find the reciprocal function. Once we find the reciprocal function, we're just going to flip it around. So whatever's on the bottom is going to go to the top. Whatever's on the top will go to the bottom, and that's how we're going to get our answer. So let's practice with a few. And we're going to use just our first quadrant. Remember, using our first quadrant, we have pi over 6, we have pi over 4, and we have pi over 3. We also know the points are 3, 2, 1, so square root of 3 over 2, square root of 2 over 2, and 1/2. And then the y values, or the sign, is just the opposite. So 1/2, square root of 2 over 2, and square root of 3 over 2. So if we're looking for cosecant of 11 pi over 6, what we're going to do is we're going to first start by finding the sine of 11 pi over 6, and then we're just going to flip it around. So when using our first quadrant, remember, 11 pi over 6 is going to be the same as any pi over 6 right here. So we're looking for the y value, and the y value is 1/2. So we know our answer is going to be 1/2. We just have to determine the sign. So we have to remember which quadrant 11 pi over 6 is in. And hopefully you remember that's in quadrant 4. It's sitting right here. Everything in quadrant 4 has a positive x but a negative y. Because we're looking at the y value, it has to be negative, so this is negative 1/2. Now that's not our answer. We need to take and find the reciprocal of this or flip it around to get cosecant. So negative 1/2, the reciprocal, is negative 2 over 1, or just negative 2. Let's look at the next one. The next one says cosecant. So instead of cosecant, we're going to find cosine of 5 pi over 4. So we are going to go to the pi over 4 right here. We are going to find the x value right here. And we know this is going to be square root of 2 over 2, but we need to know the sign. So we need to know the quadrant this is in. This is just above 1, so we're going to be just above 1 pi right here. So that would put us right here in the third quadrant. We know in the third quadrant we have a negative x and a negative y, so this is therefore going to be negative. We were looking at the x value. Now this is the cosine of 5 pi over 4. We will flip this around to get the secant, And you cannot leave a radical in the denominator, so you have to rationalize this. So what we're going to get is negative square root of 2 over 2 over 2. And look at that. Those two simplify away because we always want to reduce. So we really have just negative square root of 2 as our answer. All right, tangent and cotangent. Now, again, we're going to use our shortcut. We know the tangent of theta right here is going to be square root of 3 over 3. So we don't have to keep figuring that. We're just going to memorize that. We know the tangent right here is equal to 1. And we know the tangent right here is equal to square root of 3. And if you don't remember that, you would have to calculate it by doing y over x or sine over cosine and rationalizing the denominator. But it's best just to remember, the more complicated one comes first. You always have 1 second, and then it's square root of 3. So again, using our shortcut, if we're looking for the tangent of 11 pi over 6, we're going to be at pi over 6. So here's our pi over 6. We know our tangent is going to be equal to the square root of 3 over 3. So now we need to determine the quadrant this is in, and that is definitely here in quadrant 4. And in quadrant 4, we have a positive x and a negative y. Again, we have to remember what tangent is. Tangent is sine over cosine, or y over x. So if we take a y and make that negative, and we take x and makes that positive, we'll get a negative value. So this is going to be negative square root of 3 over 3. Now look at this one right here. This is cotangent of 11 pi over 6. So we have to first find tangent and then flip it around. There's actually a shortcut to cotangent. We'll get there in a second. So let's go ahead and find the tangent at 11 pi over 6. So we know that tangent is square root of 3 over 3 at pi over 6. So tangent of 11 pi over 6 is what we're looking for. So we know it's going to be square root of 3 over 3. And we just determined through all of this that it's negative. Okay? But now we just have to flip this around. And if we flip this around, what we're going to get is still a negative. You don't change the sign. Just find the reciprocal. That's just flipping top to bottom, bottom to top. Rationalizing the denominator. And we get negative 3 square root of 3 over 3. Or, once we simplify, negative square root of 3. And I hope you realize that it is this value. Because what we're doing is we're really just switching the x and the y. When we're finding cotangent of 11 pi over 6, cotangent is x over y. Tangent up here was y over x. We did this math already when we found the tangent of this function. Okay? Or if we flip the x and the y. So when you're finding a cotangent of something, it's still going to be one of these values right here. Either this, this, or this. So these are the tangents. If I ask you the cotangent, let's say the cotangent of this right here, it's not going to be this anymore. It's going to be this other one. So these two just flip around for tangents and cotangents, okay? Because those are reciprocals of each other. We already did that math. The one never changes because you have the same value. Okay, let's work with a negative 1. We have secant of negative 5 pi over 6. Now again, I showed you 3 different ways to find this value. You can take and you can add 2 pi to find the coterminal angle. You can take and you can go in the opposite direction, or you can take and find the positive one and then flip it around the x-axis to get it. Regardless of the way that you do this, what you're going to end up with is the values that are at 7 pi over 6. So what we're trying to find here is secant of 7 pi over 6. Or because this is secant, this is the reciprocal function of cosine. So we're going to find cosine of 7 pi over 6, and then we'll flip it around. So here I have pi over 6, and cosine is my x value. So I want to know the x value, and I have 3, 2, 1. So this is going to be square root of 3 over 2. So this right here is square root of 3 over 2. But I need to know the quadrant this is in. This is slightly above 1, so it's going to be slightly just into the third quadrant. And I know I have negative x and negative y, so this will be negative. So now I'm going to go back to finding this original secant by just flipping this around. So I have negative 2 over the square root of 3. And again, this is the same math we've done before. We have negative 2 square root of 3 all over 3 by rationalizing the denominator. This time, nothing simplifies. But there's our answer. Tangent of 5 pi over 6. Tangent, we're remembering that one. So we're going to go to pi over 6 right here, and we have to remember what is the tangent of this point. If you don't know it, you'd have to do y over x. So 1/2 divided by square root of 3 over 2. I fortunately remember that the answer, the tangent at pi over 6 is square root of 3 over 3. And just a reminder, the tangent at pi over 4 is 1, and this is supposed to be a 3. Tangent at pi over 3 is square root of 3. So because I'm looking over 6, that is square root of 3 over 3. And I just need to put the appropriate signs. I know tangent is y over x. I know 5 pi over 6 is in quadrant number 2, right about here. So I know that I have a negative x and a positive y. So with a negative x and a positive y, a positive divided by negative is negative. So this is going to be negative square root of 3 over 3. And I would recommend you pause the video and give these two a try. And for the first one, you should get 2 square root of 3 over 3 because sine is the y. It's in quadrant 2. You get square root of 3 over 2. When you flip it around and rationalize, you get your answer. And in looking at the next one, you're looking for the tangent of 5 pi over 6. Well, if you look at pi over 6, you know the tangent is square root of 3 over 3. So the reciprocal is going to actually be what the tangent is here, which is square root of 3. You could take in this value and flip it around, but that's doing more work than you need to. 5 pi over 6 is in quadrant 2. In quadrant 2, I have a negative x and a positive y. When I take a negative and divide it by a positive, I get a negative, so that's going to be negative square root of 3. And for your assignment, you will do the secant, cosecant, and cotangent Schoology quiz. Have a great day. Bye.